Up next, please join us for a debate between the two candidates vying to represent Western Massachusetts on the Governor's Council.
Welcome to a debate between the candidates for the 8th District seat on the Massachusetts Governor's Council, Republican John Comerford and Democrat Tara Jacobs.
This debate is a co-production between Focus Springfield and New England Public Media and brought to you in partnership with the Republican, Mass Live, and the Berkshire Eagle. We're your moderators, NEPM's Ray Herschel and Elizabeth Roman.
Here are the rules for the next half hour. Candidates have up to 1 minute to answer each question, up to 30 seconds for additional thoughts or a rebuttal, and 1 minute each for a closing statement. A bell will sound when the candidates have 15 seconds left, and again when their time is up. A coin toss has decided the order. We'll be asking the candidates questions along with our panelists, columnist Ron Chamelis of the Republican and Mass Live, and Greta Yoakum, reporter for the Berkshire Eagle. But before we begin, a little bit about the Governor's Council.
The 8 members of the Governor's Council approve or reject a governor's nomination for judges, clerks of court, members of the Parole Board, and other judicial positions. The council also has a say on pardons and commutations recommended by a governor. And now, let's meet our candidates. The Democratic winner of September's primary election was North Adams School Committee member Tara Jacobs. Jacobs defeated 3 attorneys from Hampden County. If she wins the general election in November, she will make history as the first Berkshire County resident to be elected to the Governor's Council. Jacobs is opposed by Republican candidate John Comerford of Palmer. Comerford is a retired welfare fraud investigator and former veterans agent. Let's begin now with our first question, and it goes to John Comerford. Mr. Comerford, what role do you feel political connections have played in the nominating process for judicial appointments? And what, in your mind, makes a good judge?
What role does the political connections, essentially?
In the past, have political connections played a role in the nominating process?
Of course they have. Absolutely. And it's understood that, it's been said that a judge is just someone who once knew a governor. Of course there's political connections, but that doesn't mean that the people that are nominated for the position of judge have any issues with them. There's nothing wrong with getting nominated by a member of your own.
You got 15 seconds.
I have 15 seconds, okay.
Conclude.
What was the rest of your question?
And also, what qualifications do you personally feel make a good judge?
Okay, a good judge has compassion. A good judge has understanding. A good judge has basically been there before the person in front of them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Comerford. Tara Jacobs, the same question to you. You have 60 seconds for your response.
Sure, thanks. First off, thank you so much for hosting this and helping us build awareness for Governor's Council. I really appreciate the time. Absolutely, there have been appointees who have a political basis. My hope as someone who is outside of the political insider world is to be able to confirm judges based on merit, and the things that I'm looking for are judicial temperament, diversity, being fair and representative of the communities that they serve.
Okay. Just a reminder to our candidates, when you hear that first bell, it means you have 15 seconds left. Okay. The second bell means your time is up. Mr. Comerford, you have 30 seconds now for a rebuttal or any additional comment you'd like to make on the question.
One of my goals as a governor's council is to make absolutely certain we select the very best people available to become judges. A judge in this society today is a very important position, absolutely critical to maintaining law and order in this day and time.
Ms. Jacobs, 30 seconds for your rebuttal or additional comment.
My focus, I've been talking across this district to community members and legal community members, and consistently hear the desire that I share for a more diverse judicial bench and parole board, as well as the other roles. So in addition to the things I already mentioned, finding people who are diverse, both in terms of their identity, but also their area of practice is a focus for me.
Thank you very much. Our next question now comes from Greta Yoakum of the Berkshire Eagle, and it will go to Tara Jacobs.
Residents in Western Massachusetts can feel that compared to their counterparts in Eastern Massachusetts, that they're often overlooked by state government in Boston. How do you plan to get input from your constituents over such a large area that you'd be representing? And what role would that input play in your decision making?
Thank you for the question. I agree, and I share that, and so many across Western Mass will nod their heads that is a key issue, is our need for more voice in Boston and more resources from Boston. And throughout the campaign, I've been connecting across the 102 cities and towns with community members from all walks of life to hear from them what their needs and concerns are and to share what Governor's Council is all about. My intention as the next Governor's Council member from this district is to continue those conversations, continue the outreach work, and extend it to continue to hear from people and actively listen, but also to bring transparency and awareness around what Governor's Council is doing, and ideally bring Governor's Council hearings to Western Mass when there are local candidates to engage community members in the work itself and to hear their voice. And secondly, as an advocate, to be that voice in Boston to help amplify our needs and our voices in Boston as the voice of the people that I intend to be.
Mr. Comerford, you have 1 minute now to answer that same question.
A number of people in the State House think that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts ends at Worcester. My intention is to disabuse them of that notion. It doesn't end at Worcester. It doesn't end in Munson. It doesn't end in the Pioneer Valley. Massachusetts does not end where they think it is. Quite frankly, my intention is to disabuse them of that notion. My intention is to be a very strong voice for the people of the entire district of this Governor's Council, for the entire district, the 8th district. My intention is to reach out to all the people and to be the Governor's Council for all the people in the 8th district.
Ms. Jacobs, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal or any additional comment you'd like to add.
Well, I'd just like to add, in addition to what I've already said, that I have been forging relationships and connections with legislators across the state, starting with our local Western Mass state reps and state senators, many of whom have endorsed my campaign and are giving me support. But building those relationships to be an effective advocate in Boston, to be able to have the ear of those who can make a difference.
Mr. Comerford, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal or your comments,
Well,
additional.
my strengths lie in getting people to listen to me. My strengths lie in being an extremely strong voice for the people in the district.
Okay. Our next question comes from Ron Shamilis of the Republican and Mass Live, and that question will go to Mr. Comerford.
Some law enforcement officials and public leaders have complained that judges are too lenient in terms of bail. Do you agree, at least to the point of considering it in your view of candidates for judgeships?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with the law enforcement. First of all, I back law enforcement 100%. There is no question in my mind that the cop on the beat is the guy that's keeping us all safe. He or she runs into danger when the rest of us are running away. And do I believe that the judges are being too lenient? Without question. And one of the things, if you come before me as a Governor's Council, that I will vigorously question you on, is your beliefs about bail, about letting people out that shouldn't be out in the street. My very strong belief is that we oftentimes let too many people out that shouldn't be out. There was an incident in Newton, Mass, with a judge that had an illegal alien, and I didn't use the word undocumented. It was illegal alien.
Time, Mr. Comerford.
Is it my turn?
Ms. Jacobs, you have a minute to answer that same question.
Sure. Well, first, I've gotten the endorsements of all the Western Mass sheriffs and many of the DAs, and I think that shows that's reflective of their belief that I will do a good job in bringing to us an even stronger judiciary. To your question about bail, I think it's an interesting one. People who are dangerous to themselves or society, we definitely need to have held until their trial. But so often, and again, I'm from Berkshire County, and so often bails that are seemingly set low for your average person are unattainably expensive for those who are already struggling financially. And it can have a devastating impact on losing their job, losing their apartment, losing their resources. And so I think it's a more nuanced answer that I would go at length to really fully answer for you.
Mr. Comerford, you've got 30 seconds to finish your thoughts on that first answer.
A couple of things. All the people that have endorsed my opponent are all Democrats, so I would expect everyone to endorse her. That's not an issue. Indicating the fact that people are poor and they can't do the time. Well, if you can't do the time, I'd suggest you not do the crime.
And Ms. Jacobs, 30 seconds for your rebuttal or additional comment.
So just to expand on finish what I was originally leading towards is that I think bail is a tool, as are the other like parole and commutations. These are tools in the judicial toolbox, and I think they need to be used appropriately.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Elizabeth Roman from NEPM, and that question will go to Tara Jacobs.
While Supreme Judicial Court Chief Justice Kimberly Budd has significant family ties to Springfield, no sitting SJC justice is a Western Massachusetts resident. Is this a factor you'll consider when considering nominations, and will you urge the governor to appoint Western Massachusetts judges to the SJC?
Thank you for that question, and absolutely, and it's ironic, I was literally just talking about this earlier in the morning. Yeah, we have not had representation on the Supreme Judicial Court from Western Mass for far too long, over a decade at least. And I think that matters. It's part of what we're talking about when we talk about not being well represented in Boston, and we absolutely should have a voice at that particular panel. So yes, persuading the governor to nominate a Western Mass person to the SJC is absolutely a priority, as too is advocating for positions in Western Mass, judicial positions in our district and Supreme Courts to be filled, and to be filled from people who are from the area and representational of the communities that they will serve.
Okay. Mr. Comerford, you have a minute to answer that question.
Well, suggesting to the governor that he nominate people from your district is fine, except for the fact that as a governor's counsel, you don't really counsel the governor on anything. You may get to talk to him or her once in a while, but you don't get to counsel them on anything. The problem with saying we want people from the district to be nominated is, first of all, they have to apply. You know, the governor just doesn't reach out and say to someone, I want you to be a governor on Superior Court. I want you to do this. The individual has to apply for the position, and there has to be an open position. They just don't apply for judgeships. And again, a governor's counsel, it's a misnomer. We don't counsel the governor on anything. We, as the United States Senate does, we confirm.
Ms. Jacobs, 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
I think to a degree, this position is what you make of it through relationship building and the access that you have. There are several sitting members of Governor's Council who do regularly sit with and influence the decisions of the governor in these areas.
You got 15 seconds.
Oh, sorry. Okay. And secondly, while you're not a counselor in the therapeutic sense, counsel, that is your role, and you do meet regularly with the governor and the lieutenant governor and can advocate and influence.
Okay. Mr. Comerford, last 30 seconds on this question goes to you.
My opponent is incorrect. You don't meet regularly with the governor. You barely get to say hello to him or her. You do meet on Wednesdays with the ex officio member, which is the lieutenant governor, but you don't meet as a matter of course with the governor. You just don't.
Since you brought that up, I'm going to give you each 15 seconds. Ms. Jacobs, 15 seconds. Would you respond to those remarks?
So I have met with most of the current sitting governor's council members and spoken at length about their work and what they do. And it is, again, what you make of it. Some don't take advantage of that, but many of them do on a weekly basis have persuasive conversations with the governor.
And Mr. Comerford, last 15 seconds to you if you so desire.
I don't want to keep repeating myself. You do not counsel the governor on anything. You don't. That's not your position. Your position is to confirm nominees for the bench and other appointments.
Okay, our next question comes from Greta Yoakum from the Berkshire Eagle, and this question will go to John Comerford.
The council also approves members of the state's parole board. What qualities would you prioritize in future members of that board and why? And also, what criteria would you look for in granting parole or commutation?
Well, to answer the last part of your question first, I'm not in favor of parole or commutations. There were 2 commutations done fairly recently of 2 convicted murderers. All 8 of the Democratic Governor's Council members approved the commutation. I would have said no. I read up on their crimes, and because of these 2 gentlemen, a family member was killed, and a family is probably still crying today about that. I would have said absolutely not. And the other part of your question was?
Yeah, the first part of the question is that the council also approves members of the state's parole board. What qualities would you prioritize in future members and why?
For the parole board, I would look for somebody that's been involved with law enforcement in some capacity. Not necessarily an attorney, but maybe a retired police officer or something of that nature. But somebody's been involved with the system before.
Ms. Jacobs, you have a minute now to respond to that question.
So in terms of parole board, it's one of the areas that I am very interested in hopefully bringing more diversity to that board, both in terms of, again, I'd like to see more people of color and Spanish speaking, but also background. Currently, it is very heavily representational of our law enforcement and prosecutors, and I really think we need to extend that to have points of view at the bench who are more reflective of things like social work and mental health to diversify those voices. In terms of pardons and commutations, I think they're an important tool that are a symbol of hope and a reason to work towards rehabilitation. And without them, I think it detracts from what the goal of our justice system is. And recently there were 4 commutations given just literally last week that were all for wealthy folks who wanted access to gun licenses in gated communities, and all of those were approved.
Okay. Mr. Comerford, 30 seconds to you.
Well, again, I'm opposed to commutations or pardons. I believe in this life, if you take a life, since we don't have the death penalty in this Commonwealth, that you should get locked up for the rest of your life. There should be everybody that goes to jail, everybody that's in prison. First of all, no one's guilty, and second of all, they all find God in prison. So if I want to visit God, I'm going to go to a local prison because that's where he seems to be. If they all find God, they all find a reason, they all find a way to get through the system so they can get their name to the governor's office for commutation. I'm opposed to it.
Ms. Jacobs, we'll give you 40 seconds for your final thoughts.
I appreciate that. Well, we all know there are people in prison who the Innocence Project repeatedly has successfully represented. Not everyone who is in prison currently has actually committed the crime that they're accused of. Secondly, there's laws that have changed that people are in prison for that are no longer illegal. There are a number of cases that we should be looking at and be giving pardons and commutations to in reflection of changing times and fairness.
Ron Shamilis will ask our next question now, and Ron, that question goes to Tara Jacobs.
Is it practical for you or any governor's council candidate to remove your personal political opinions from considerations? And for that matter, is it even important to do that?
So my political positions are more value positions, and I do think my values are important in doing this work in terms of wanting to see justice that is fair, members of the bench and parole board who will do their job with fairness and work against the bias that's implicit in our system. That is probably why I'm a Democrat, is because these are values that align with the Democratic platform, but it's sort of a cart which comes first kind of a situation. It's really that moral compass that is driving my desire to do this work and how I will approach this work, more so than political affiliation being the signpost that I follow.
Mr. Comerford, a minute for that same question.
Well, I'm a Republican for a different reason. I'm a Republican because that's the party of the people. I'm a Republican because I firmly believe that if somebody does the crime, they should be doing the time. I'm not in favor of sending social workers in to do what police officers are supposed to be doing. I'm not in favor of extending commutations or pardons to people who have committed a crime. If you cannot do the time, don't do the crime.
Ms. Jacobs, 30 seconds for your rebuttal or response.
Just that our judicial system is a complex machine with many parts that are outside the scope of the Governor's Council work, but that are all interconnected. And we know there's research that shows there's racial bias at play. And I think it's important as a member of Governor's Council for me to approach it from the standpoint of trying to do what I can with this role to affect change to try to improve that situation.
And Mr. Comerford, you have the last 30 seconds on the question.
I think Ms. Jacobs wants to come here as the Governor's Council and reinvent the wheel. The wheel was invented about 4 billion years ago, and it's worked fine ever since. I think her approach is not focusing on the true business of the Governor's Council.
Okay, let's move on to our next question now, and this will come from Elizabeth Roman. Elizabeth, question goes to Mr. Comerford.
Are you aware of the percentage of judges in Massachusetts who are women and or people of color? And if so, what are those numbers? And when you're conducting a candidate review, is it something that you think is important to consider as a factor in your decision?
Well, no, I couldn't tell you how many female and who are people of color. No. To me, that's not important. It would not be a factor if somebody were before the Governor's Council. Wouldn't enter into my thought process as to whether that person was of color or it was a female. I'm looking at the credentials of the person that's being nominated to the judgeship, and I'm not looking at who they are essentially.
Ms. Jacobs?
Oh, sorry. I think it's a great question. It's one that I've given a lot of thought to myself and had many conversations in the community about. We do have very few women and people of color on the bench. I wish I had a number for you. I know I've heard it, but I didn't retain it. But what I have heard repeatedly from lawyers, from retired judges, from district attorneys across the district is that it is an issue. We have an underrepresentation compared to the population served on the bench of people of color, of women of color, of women. as well as a lack of diversity in terms of background. There's an overrepresentation from the prosecutor side and not enough from public defenders and family practice and the other legal practices. And it's an issue, and it's one that I very much intend to work on. And while the Governor's Council can only confirm who's in front of them, they can absolutely influence people to toss their hat in and to suggest that they are good candidates to go forward. And my intention is to do that work.
Mr. Comerford, 30 seconds for a response.
Well, I don't look at the Governor's Council as an employment agency suggesting people apply for a job. There's a board that answers to the governor and suggests nominees for the job of judge, and I firmly believe that it's their task to try and influence people to become judges, and it's the job of the Governor's Council to confirm or deny.
Ms. Jacobs, 30 seconds to you.
So I have been actually making strides to connect with our legal community of color, women, LGBTQ, and different practice areas in an effort to have these conversations, to change the narrative that the door is open to these people for judicial process. And I do think it's an important focus. The second part being, we really need to encourage our youth towards careers in law with an eye towards having a pipeline, because we are underrepresented in the legal community from these marginalized groups.
And that concludes our question and answer portion of our debate. We come now to our closing statements. Mr. Comerford, you'll go first, and you have 1 minute for your final statement.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you for having us. I appreciate it. Any opportunity I can get to reach out to the electorate, I'm happy to do. I want to say that I'm on the ballot because of an issue that happened. I started to say it earlier, but I got cut off. In Newton, Mass, where a judge had an illegal alien in front of her. And I didn't say undocumented individual, I said illegal. He was here in this country illegally. And apparently the court officer went up to the judge and said that immigration was outside waiting for this gentleman, and the judge suggested that he show the gentleman out the back door. Well, that was a violation of her oath of office, and I'm here to.
Time, Mr. Comerford. Just wrap up very quickly. Last sentence.
Okay, I'm here to ask for the vote of the people that are watching this program. I intend to be a very, very strong voice on Beacon Hill for the electorate in this district.
Mr. Comerford, time. I'm sorry. Ms. Jacobs, you'll have 1:15. We'll give you a few extra seconds. Closing statement.
I appreciate that. And I want to echo a thanks for giving us this platform. Awareness is such an issue for Governor's Council, and any opportunity to talk about it is so welcomed. I am running to be the voice of the people in the work of the Governor's Council and in the State House to represent all of Western Mass. I've had so many conversations across the 102 towns and cities of this district that have had similar threads across the board, and it tells me that we have more that unites us than divides us. And I hope to be your next Governor's Council member to do the work of Governor's Council, to be an advocate in Beacon Hill, and I very much would appreciate your vote on November 8th and your help spreading the word on this important but little understood role. So if you know about it, any help in spreading the word will help make sure people actually vote for counselor on the ballot. It doesn't say Governor's Council, so that's important to get out there as well. And please vote for me on November 8th. Thank you.
We're out of time. Our thanks to the candidates.
And thank you for joining us here at the studios of Focus Springfield. And be sure to vote on Tuesday, November 8th. I'm Marie Herschel.
And I'm Elizabeth Roman. Have a good evening.
Bye.